Elite Facts presents
10 of the worst uses of CGI in films and television.
10.
The Rock, The Mummy Returns. Okay, let's start off with one of the most infamous uses of CGI. The Mummy Returns was a fun film. Sure, it wasn't a great film in terms of story, but it sure was an incredible amount of fun to watch. We're not sure if it was the setting, all the memorable characters, or if it was just the actors obviously having a good time, but it's just a really satisfying film to watch. Well, that is until The Rock shows up. Why does Dwayne Johnson take on the weirdest roles? Whether he's playing the Tooth Fairy or a CGI abomination, he always chooses roles that don't really show his acting skills. His role in The Mummy was that of the legendary Scorpion King, Matthias of Akkad. He shows up at the climax of the film and, oh dear God, what happened? The film for the most part looked amazing, but this is downright the worst special effect of the film. It looks like his image was ripped from the latest SmackDown video game at the time. It would have been more awesome if he just appeared like a regular human with super strength, but nope. Instead, we get a poorly digitized Scorpion version of The Rock that looks like it belongs in an early PS2 bargain bin video game.
9.
James Bond rides the waves, Die Another Day. What did you expect? Potentially the worst Bond film in the series gets one of the worst special effects in the series. Die Another Day is certainly a film that places more emphasis on its set pieces than it does on its characters. And when it does focus on its characters, it just downright sucks. Whether it's Halle Berry's wooden acting, Toby Stephens' tendency to chew the scenery as Gustav Graves, which admittedly is kind of fun to watch, or seeing the character Zhao being completely underutilized. The film was a bit of a mess, to say the least, and you can't help but feel bad for Pierce Brosnan, who's arguably one of the better actors to play the role of James Bond. He seemed to always get these hacky scripts that completely let him down and made him very forgettable in the role. Well, two things do stick out from this particular film: the amazing car chase scene over a frozen lake of ice and the horrible CGI glacier scene. This is just so awkward. During the film, the main villain, Gustav Graves, launches a solar energy ray close to Bond's perimeter, causing the ice caps to melt, which in turn causes a massive tsunami. Now, what does Bond do here? Well, he surfs across the waves awkwardly on a piece of metal. Yeah, you heard that right. Surfs on a piece of metal in a freaking tsunami. Not only do the waves look horrendous, but Bond looks like he's completely made of rubber. It's just a really awkward scene, and whoever was behind a concept like this should be ashamed.
8.
Shark Attack, Deep Blue Sea. So Deep Blue Sea was a crazy film. It's one of those movies where the writer, the director, and the producer were like, hey, you know what? Let's just make a film for fun. They knew they wouldn't be winning any Oscars, so they made the film with the focus on just having fun. And nothing says fun like Samuel L. Jackson and friends surviving ravenous sharks on a submarine fueling facility. Now, as fun as it is, the film can be very immersion-breaking because the sharks look absolutely awful. Okay, maybe that's a bit harsh. They don't look too bad, but it's another case of the CGI not blending well with the live-action shots of the film. And for 1999, it was actually pretty impressive for the time. But looking at it now, in the underwater segments of the shark attacks, the sharks look like overgrown bath toys. But hey, the film is still really fun to watch, regardless of the cheap effects. Oh, and don't even bother asking where the Sharknado films are on this list. Those films are too easy to target.
7.
Wolverines Claws, X-Men Origins Wolverine. How did they mess this up? They had 3 films beforehand where they got Wolverine's claws to look just fine. Even in X-Men 3, The Last Stand, look at him, his claws looked fine. Anyway, X-Men Origins Wolverine wasn't a great film by any stretch of the imagination. Some people love it and others hate it. The film was riddled with cliches and terrible dialogue, but it did feature the big screen debut of Deadpool, played by Ryan Reynolds. Well, kind of. He looks more like Baraka from Mortal Kombat. Along with the terrible makeup job it took to create Baraka Pool's new look, the CGI claws that were implemented in the film were absolutely horrible. There's no way you can tell us that using practical effects for the claws would cost too much, especially considering the amount of money they knew they would make on this film. You could cut the claws out of cardboard and wrap them in tinfoil, and it would still look better than the CGI claws that were included in the final cut.
6,
CDC Explosion, The Walking Dead. Now, you can excuse The Walking Dead for this. I mean, the show was only in its first season, and no one knew what a monster hit it would become, so the budget was nowhere near the likes of, say, Game of Thrones when that was in its first season. Not to mention that the show was broadcast on cable, meaning their production company, AMC, couldn't afford an explosion that looked a lot more realistic, so for the budget they probably had, you can't really blame them. The explosion itself looks pretty cheap to say the least. It honestly looked like someone pasted an animated GIF over most parts of the scene. Now, granted, the particle effects of the building breaking down is pretty cool to look at. However, it just looks so out of place. It really shows you how far the show has come with the CGI since season 1. I mean, look at them now. They have a freaking hybrid animatronic CGI tiger this season, and it looks awesome.
5,
Komodo dragon Skyfall. Okay, so it kind of kills us to put possibly one of the best James Bond films on this list. However, we can't overlook that Komodo dragon. Now, it's not that the render of the Komodo dragon's models is bad or anything, it just looks so unnatural.
4,
The whole film, Birdemic. Okay, so this one might not be fair to include on this list considering it is a budget exploitation film, but let's be honest, this use of computer-generated imagery is absolutely amazing. Not. We call this movie to your attention because it's one of those films that needs to be seen to be believed.
3,
Laser gun effect, Machete Kills. Okay, so this film is like the midway point between a budget B movie and a Hollywood blockbuster, which is really kind of weird. Not only is the film presented like a B movie, but it had a budget of $10 million, making it one of the more expensive B movies ever made. The film itself is crazy. It's certainly not a film that should ever be taken seriously, as it involves a former federale agent wielding a machete and dealing out vigilante justice to violent border patrol officers, corrupt politicians, and a maniacal entrepreneur played by Mel Gibson. Oh, and let's not forget that Charlie Sheen is the president of the freaking United States in this movie. Go figure. The film features some pretty bad special effects, and these awful effects are on full display when a weapon is used that turns people inside out. It looks like something that was crafted together in Photoshop by a first-year CGI student. What's even more ironic is that a character played by the world-renowned special effects artist Tom Savini is killed using this weapon. Great special effects artist killed by a horrible special effect. How ironic.
2,
Airplane Explosion, Die Hard 2. Die Hard is a series that features a lot of awesome action set pieces. No matter what film you watch, whether it's one of the good ones in the series or one of the bad ones, you're always guaranteed to have at least one scene that's incredibly exciting, regardless of how ridiculous it is. Well, Die Hard 2 may have jumped the shark, as this one particular scene is not only ridiculous, but it's just so laughably bad that it's actually enjoyable. This scene is the infamous airplane explosion scene. So the explosion itself in this scene looked fine. The fire mixed with the wreckage of the airplane looked top-notch. But guess what completely ruins this scene? Oh, nothing much, just a superimposed Bruce Willis strapped to his ejector seat flying straight up towards the camera. Although it's technically a blue screen effect, this still counts towards computer-generated imagery.
1,
Paper cutout shark, Jaws 3D. Who else can't stand when someone says that the shark in the original Jaws looked fake? It makes you wonder, well, how did Jaws 3 get a free pass? Well, for starters, the film itself is completely forgettable. The idea of this film was to make the audience feel the terror that Jaws instills in beachgoers worldwide through the use of 3D. The end result was something that just made audiences confused about all the fuss. There is literally one scene of the film where we're sure people decided to just walk out of the theater at the sheer sight of it. The scene includes Jaws slowly and lifelessly swimming towards an underwater observation facility and crashing straight through the window. Now, what makes this so bad is the fact that Jaws doesn't move whatsoever, and it remains completely still the second the glass breaks. Not to mention the fact that the water doesn't even pour into the room when the glass breaks. So the whole scene is just completely weird. Sometimes practical effects are really the way to go.
Don't forget to like us and subscribe for more Elite Facts.